Ever since the science revolution, the idea of skepticism has become mainstream. But can skepticism actually do more harm than you thought? Well, I'm addressing this very question. But before I do, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you want more bite-sized pieces of information about that thing in your head. No, not that workout routine you think you're going to do, but if you're anything like me, you won't. But the brain. Skepticism involves adding doubt and uncertainty to a belief or acquired knowledge. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, a healthy amount of skepticism can allow you to learn more because you're asking questions and seeking out factual information, which is the case when you use what I call objective skepticism. This is the kind of skepticism scientists employ to generate hypotheses, test ideas, and draw conclusions. Where skepticism becomes problematic is when it is used as the sole reason for supporting a bias, which I call convenient skepticism. For example, when questioning well-established scientific fact, when challenged, it's saying, well, I'm just being skeptical. Sometimes when people who use convenient skepticism do offer evidence for their position, it's evidence supporting a bias or belief system, and generally not evidence based on consensus or fact. Convenient skepticism is actually a pretty common occurrence, and you may often encounter it during arguments or from positions that are based on a false equivalence fallacy. This is a logical fallacy where two sides are made to appear equally valid, but they actually aren't, in any way, shape, or form, equally legitimate points. Here are a few examples of the false equivalence fallacy. Lions and tigers are both large carnivorous cats, so they're basically the same. Most nutritionists believe a healthy diet is good for you, but one nutritionist disagrees, so it's still hotly debated. Socks are warm and comfortable, therefore I can wear them with sandals. Okay, the last one isn't a false equivalence fallacy, it's just a horrible decision. But you get my point. The false equivalence fallacy is a very powerful messaging tool that takes advantage of a psychological phenomenon known as dichotomous thinking. Now, before I explain exactly what this is, I want to point out that some people are more prone to thinking in this way more than others. Still, we can all fall victim to this kind of thinking, especially during emotionally charged situations. That being said, what is dichotomous thinking? Dichotomous thinking is the tendency to view a situation or an event in strictly binary terms. In this way, you may see something as either left or right, up or down, good or bad, and it can result in the inability to see and understand ambiguity and nuance. So why is it that we occasionally think this way? Well, frankly, it's really easy to fall into this style of thinking. Much of the information we consume is presented in binary or dichotomous terms. A very clear instance of this is the structure of political parties and therefore political messaging in the United States, where the country is dominated by a two-party system. In a way, this kind of thought process doesn't demand too many cognitive resources. As mentioned, we can find ourselves thinking in strictly binary terms due to our emotions. Now, here's the thing. We're all emotional. We just express or feel different emotions at different times to varying degrees. If you think about it, what are you feeling right now? Perhaps enjoyment because you're watching a brief brain snacks video? Providing that there's no existence of some pathology, regarding emotions, we rarely feel nothing. And in order to not fall into the trap of dichotomous thinking myself, I do want to point out that we can, and often do, feel multiple conflicting emotions at once. So pause. This part is about how your brain is wired to be illogical. Yep, your and my brain naturally thinks illogically before it thinks logically. When you encounter an object, situation, or even an idea, your brain sends the information into two primary directions. One direction information is sent is to the cortex that encompasses areas responsible for making assessments, understanding, planning, and even critical thinking. The other direction information is sent is to the amygdala, the emotional hotspot in the brain, housed within the emotional and impulsive limbic system. While the cortex and the amygdala are activated at around the same time, it's the amygdala that gets to make the initial decision. It determines if we like something or not, even before the cortex understands what it is we've encountered. While this may not make much sense on the surface, there actually is a very practical reason this happens. According to researchers, our brains have to first think dichotomously because immediate emotional assessments assist in survival. Higher level cognition would get in the way of reactions that protect us from things like those lions and tigers that, while different, are still both carnivorous cats. However, dichotomous thinking puts us at a disadvantage when entering emotionally charged discussions. One place this happens today is in scientific discussion, where some people, for nefarious reasons, have worked tirelessly to infuse a normal, rational sphere of discussion with emotion. These nefarious people often infuse certain scientific topics with fear, such as the threat of a lost job or the prospect of a sick child. Even a logical discussion of these topics reveals they do not contain these threats. Often, these nefarious people attempt to disguise their false equivalence by claiming they're simply being skeptical. As an example, let's return to the discussion around nutrition. 97 to 98% of nutrition scientists agree that humans can live healthy lives when they practice a healthy and balanced diet. However, say a candy bar company wants to sell more candy bars, so they hire some skeptical nutritionists to create a false equivalence fallacy between the healthy foods are good scientists and 1 to 2% who believe candy bars are good. Later in the news, you hear someone saying, well, the debate's still out on diet anyways. This is not skepticism. It's false equivalence. The messaging trick is to have regular people, like you and me, believe that we are taking a scientific stance by remaining skeptical of the actual science where consensus has been established. It allows the discourse to be contaminated, while also allowing the general public to believe that they are taking a scientific approach. However, as said earlier, they're simply using their emotional brain to justify their skepticism of science. This perspective doesn't just live in examples, like the one I just mentioned. It exists in our society today. Convenient skepticism can lead to decisions that hurt science, such as the removal of public funding to combat real-world existing problems, or the destruction of scientific understanding, building a general mistrust between the public and scientists. So, how can you become a better skeptic? First, remember that your brain is emotional before it's logical, and your initial assessment may be emotional. When confronted with new ideas, ask yourself if the idea leans on logical fallacies, such as the false equivalence fallacy. Be mindful of the framing of an issue, and of language consisting of extremes, such as terms like all or none, because rarely is an issue that simple. Finally, recognize that we live in a world full of complexities and ambiguities. Thus, and most importantly, always remain skeptical of convenient skepticism. Have you ever experienced a time in which you found yourself being overly skeptical, or even if you found someone doing the same? Leave me a comment below. If you liked what you watched, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to share with family and friends. Also, make sure to hit that like button. Also, if you want to support my channel with big brainiac energy, then head on over to my Patreon page to become a contributing member. And as always, thank you for feeding your brain with brief brain snacks.